Hey there, it's Greg Miliatis from Streamline, and today I want to talk to you about how to create Excel-friendly SSRS reports from ProLaw. So basically, every firm that I've worked with over the past 22 years with ProLaw uses Excel reports. And even though they still use ProLaw SSRS reports, they also use Excel reports for sort of the day-to-day management of the firm. The issue, though, is that getting data from ProLaw into Excel isn't always easy. There are a number of ways to do it, but it basically isn't always very easy, especially with ProLaw SSRS reports, and there are a few reasons for that. Generally, what I've found is that virtually all ProLaw reports, and this is true with the default/canned reports as well as any custom reports that are created, but typically the default and the canned reports, they almost always require tedious manual cleanup in Excel for things like removing extraneous columns or rows, removing subtotals, page footers, page headers, resizing columns in Excel, all those kinds of things. And then the issue with that cleanup is that you have to do that manual cleanup every single time you run the report, even with a different query or something, or different grouping, whatever it is. So it becomes very tedious very quickly. But there is an easier way to do it. So you can actually create a copy of your report and format that copy as an Excel-friendly version of the report. And it's actually pretty simple to do. And even if you're a novice to working with SSRS reports, it's actually pretty simple to do. So let's see how. Okay, so let's take a look at what a ProLaw report saved to Excel looks like. And for this example, I'm just in an evaluation sort of demo database here, and I'm running a transactions report, and I'm just running the default listing report. So once I saved that to Excel, and you all probably know how to do that, so I save it to Excel, and then I get this report. So here's what the report looks like. And actually this doesn't look too bad, but I'm going to point out a couple of problems here with it. And this is a very simple report, but I've seen clients who run like, general ledger reports and accounting reports and things where exporting it to Excel is very messy and they have to do all this manual cleanup. So I'm just going to go through here and highlight a couple of issues. So if you look at the rows here in Excel, you can see there's 1, 2, 3 is super small, there's 4, 5, and 6 are completely squashed. And same thing with the columns. So column A, who knows where that is. Column I is all squished. And then if I scroll down here, down to the bottom, there's a similar issue at the bottom here. So we've got this grand total, which is fine. But then column 61, that's also squashed. And so again, these are kind of simple. This is sort of a simple report, but it gives you an idea of some of the cleanup that you may end up having to do when you export it multiple times. And again, a simple report, but I've seen clients that have to run these reports on a daily or weekly or monthly basis where the cleanup is very onerous for them. So I'm going to use this as a very simple example to show you how to make this SSRS report to be Excel friendly. So what I've done here real quickly is I went and I made a copy, clicked on copy. I made a copy of this listing report and then I just renamed it to listing Excel friendly. I haven't done anything with it yet. If I preview it though, it looks exactly the same, and except it's got my little report name on it now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into design mode for it, and if you haven't gone into design for reports, you just click on this design button here, or you can right click and go to design from there. I've already opened design mode to save us a couple seconds. So here's our report, and I can see a couple things real quickly. I can see we've got our header. This is the stuff in the header. If I click in the blank space, I can see this is the header, and I can see a couple things right off the bat. I can see that this first field is not at the very top, and then if I scroll down, I can also see with this location, it's not all the way to the left. And so these kind of little gaps or alignment issues are what are causing these extraneous rows here. Like this is the space above this first field on the report. That's why we're getting this blank row. And then column A, which we don't see here, I can kind of select it if I'm mousing over with my arrow keys. That's what's caused by this left alignment being like, hundreds of the thousandths of, an inch or so off to the right, from the left. So we need to kind of adjust that And probably I've also seen if I click somewhere in this Tablix here, I can click that to select it. And if I go down, I can also see this location. It's all the way at 0 to the left, which is fine, but it's not all the way at the top. So there's going to be an extra blank row there, and just some other stuff like that that makes it kind of weird. We've also got, in a lot of default or canned ProLaw reports, the first column in the Tablix is kind of squashed. It could be even squashed a little bit more than that, and so that's why we're getting this column B here. It's sort of like a spacer column. It just looks kind of jinky though. In here, we don't really need that since we're exporting it to Excel. All we want in Excel is a nice clean table of data. If I go further over, let's see, what else do I see here? This left of the right of the table looks fairly good. There's no extra blank space there that would cause extraneous columns and things. And then at the bottom here, we've got the page footer. On some reports, it actually prints and saves to the Excel file, and generally we just want to get rid of that, because if you've got like page breaks and stuff in there, it can insert these or insert the headers and footers, column headers, header rows, or the subtotal rows in there, and it just creates a giant mess in Excel. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to highlight this field. I just click and drag my mouse to highlight the field, and I want to tell it to be all the way at the 0 left position and all the way at the top position. So it's all the way up there. I also want to make sure that I don't have any blank space between these two fields in the header. So I'm going to make the size of this field kind of like an even size, and I'll tell you why I'm going to do that. So I'll just make it an even 0.4 inches. So it's going to squash it just very slightly. Then what I can do is highlight this other field, and I know that this field above it is 0.4 inches tall, so I can tell it to make the location, instead of the top here, instead of 0.56 whatever, I can make it 0.4, and then it's going to put this immediately under this top field with no blank space. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to push it over 0 to the left. And then what I'm going to do to make sure that there isn't any additional alignment issues here, I'm going to highlight both of these fields. I'm just going to click and drag so I can highlight both of them and move it over just so it's even with this other column here. And you saw that little blue thing when I click and drag it. When it locks to a column or this end of the page, it'll give me that little blue line there. And then the last thing I'm going to do on this header is I'm going to just go down and squash it all up so there's no blank space underneath these two fields here. Okay, so I fixed the header. I don't actually need the footer here, so I'm just going to right click and say remove the footer. That way I know that it's not going to give me any problems on the Excel layout. And I'm going to do something similar with this Tablix here. I'm basically going to make sure that it's all the way to the left and all the way to the top of the page, the body of the report. That way it's not going to, when I save it to Excel, there are going to be no extraneous rows or columns to the top or left of this Tablix. So I'll click somewhere in the Tablix to see these gray column and row header things. I'll click the little square to select the Tablix, go all the way down to the properties, and I can see the location here. It's all the way to the left, which is great, but it's not quite at the top, which would cause a blank row in Excel when we save it. So do that. So now it's all the way top left, and then I'm going to go over here and let's see if just kind of squash it down just to make sure that there's no extra report body besides the Tablix there. Then the other thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go here and we're not actually going to use any of the groupings when we run the report. And the reason why is because typically when you run a report and export it to Excel, you just want like this clean table of data, just rows and columns. You don't want any headers, footers, subtotals, anything like that. Once you put it in Excel, then you can use Excel's subtotals feature to get those subtotals. It's an easier way to do it than trying to finagle the headers and footers from the groupings in the SSRS report when you've exported it to Excel. So it's much easier to use Excel's subtotal feature than try to clean up ProLaw's SSRS report groupings. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to move this up, make it a little bit wider here. And really what I want to do is I want to kind of get rid of it. But before I do that, I can see that if I click in this cell here, it's a merged cell. So I'm going to, and these other cells are merged also. So I think what I'm going to do, let's see, we've got some subtotals down here as well that are kind of merged as well. I think the easiest way to do this is to move the things that are in this the next column. So I'm basically going from left to right. I'm looking for the next column that actually has some data in it. I'm going to put that, whatever data is in that first column, I'm sorry, the first data column. I'm going to move these header and field values or expressions to the first column, and then I'll get rid of these two columns here. What we're going to end up with is that every single column is going to have some data in it. We won't have any columns that have blank data. So I'm just going to click on this cell to select it. With my keyboard, I'll do Control-C to copy, Control-V to paste. It'll paste it in there. I'll do the same thing here on this cell, copy it, paste it, and then I can get rid of this column and this column. So every column that I have, there's date, professional, initials, every column has something in it. And then I can also, I don't want this extra extraneous space here, so I'm going to squash that down. So I don't have any headers, well, I've got a header. I don't have any footers or extraneous space on the side there. I can see this is sort of misaligned. And before I do that though, I've got matter ID, client sort, matter description, narrative, all that stuff in there. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to make an extra column for the matter ID. That way in the report in Excel, if I want to group it by matter ID or do some pivot table or something, I can have matter ID in its own column. And that way you can have a separate field in Excel for grouping, pivot tables, things like that. So I'm just going to go here, fields, find the matter ID. And there we go. Okay. And let's see. And these, I think I'm going to actually make these are the header fields here. I'm just going to make them the entire width. That way they'll span the whole thing. So I'm going to save that. And let's rerun our report. And then we'll save it to Excel. I'll call it version 2. And let's open it up. So again, this is the original version here that had all these weird columns and row things here. Okay, so when I open it up here now, you can see I don't have, there's column A with data in it. Column 1, I'm sorry, row 1, 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth. Either of these fields span the entire width of the report. I've got my matter ID in its own column, and we don't have any extraneous stuff going on. So it's a very clean report, and now you can do things like, again, use Excel's subtotals or groupings on it. You can do pivot tables on whatever columns you want here. You can do all that kind of fun stuff that you would normally do in Excel without having to manually clean it up every single time. So that's the advantage of using an Excel-friendly report as opposed to trying to manually clean all this stuff up each time you run the report. Okay, so it's actually not too difficult. There are a few things to pay attention to when you're doing the cleanup, but it's actually pretty simple. And the point that I want to make here is not only that you can get Excel-friendly reports out of ProLaw, but there are actually several other ways to create Excel reports using ProLaw data. This is just one of them. So you run a ProLaw report, you export it to Excel, and then you can manipulate and use the data in Excel however you want it. But there are other ways to get data from ProLaw into Excel. And probably the best way, or the sort of the favorite way of the firms I work with, to do it is to use fully automated Excel reports to do it. So basically what they do is they tie directly to the ProLaw database, and they may have like parameters that you can enter, like beginning and ending date, area of law, stuff like that. And so you can end up with these much more finessed, much more automated reports than you can possibly design yourself, or well, you could design them yourself, but it's way easier and way faster to automate these kinds of reports in ProLaw. So here you can see just a couple examples that I've done over the years for folks with, like I said, start and end date parameters, groupings. You click a button to refresh the data, it snags it from the ProLaw database per your parameters and filters, and it gives you the report that you want. You can even create different automations that you can do, like mass changes, or do things in ProLaw that you couldn't do manually very easily. So there's a whole wide range of options that you can use for automating Excel reports, fully automating Excel reports in ProLaw. So that's just kind of scratching the surface. If you've got questions or need help with that, just give me a holler. There's my email and phone number, and we can help you out there.